Identity and access management for Azure ML is exam domain D1. 1. And it shows up in scenario questions constantly. The core model is Azure RBAC, role-based access control. And you need to understand it at every scope level. The scope hierarchy goes management group at the top, then subscription, then resource group, then individual resource. When you assign a role at a higher scope, it inherits down. If you give a user the Azure ML Data Scientist role at the resource group scope, they have that role across every AML workspace in that resource group. If you assign it at the workspace resource level, it only applies to that one workspace. For the exam, always assign roles at the lowest scope that satisfies the requirement. Principle of least privilege. Azure ML has 3 built-in roles you must know. Azure ML Data Scientist can create experiments, submit jobs, manage models, and access data stores, but cannot create or delete compute resources. This is the role for your modeling team. Azure ML Compute Operator can create, manage, and delete compute instances and clusters, but can't access data or models. This is for the operations team that manages compute infrastructure. Reader. Read-only access to everything in the workspace for stakeholders who need visibility without the ability to change anything. When built-in rules don't fit your organization's needs, custom rules let you combine specific permissions from the full AML permission set. A common custom role in Enterprise MLOps is ML Pipeline Operator. Can submit jobs and view results, but cannot register models to the registry without a secondary approval step. Managed Identity and Service Principle. For automated systems, CI/CD pipelines, GitHub Actions workflows, batch inference jobs, you never use a human user's credentials. You have 2 options. System assigned managed identity. Each AML workspace gets one automatically managed tied to the workspace lifecycle. When the workspace is deleted, the identity is deleted. User assigned managed identity. You create it independently, assign it to the workspace, and it can be shared across multiple resources. Service Principal, an Azure AD application identity with a client ID and secret. The traditional approach for CI/CD and still widely used. For new deployments, managed identity is preferred because no secret needs to be rotated. Knowing the RBAC roles in isolation isn't enough. The exam gives you team scenarios and asks you to design the correct role assignment. Let's walk through the 4 most common patterns. Data scientists need to run experiments, submit training jobs, access training data, and register models. The role assignment is Azure ML Data Scientist on the workspace resource plus storage blob data reader on the specific storage accounts containing training data. Why both? Because Azure ML Data Scientist gives workspace permissions but doesn't automatically grant storage permissions. If you see an exam question where a data scientist can submit jobs but gets a storage access error when the job tries to read data, the missing piece is the storage blob data reader role on the data store's underlying storage account. The MLOps engineer needs everything the data scientist needs, plus the ability to create and manage compute resources and configure networking. The pattern is contributor on the resource group. This covers compute and networking, plus Azure ML Data Scientist on the workspace. Contributor at the resource group scope is powerful, so in sensitive environments you'd replace it with a custom role that grants only the specific compute and network permissions needed. A CI/CD service principal that runs automated model deployment needs a narrow scope, Azure ML Data Scientist on the workspace, to deploy models and endpoints, plus contributor to the specific endpoint resource to update deployments, plus read access to the model registry. Keep CI/CD service principal scoped narrowly. A compromised service principal with contributor at the resource group level is a serious incident. Read-only stakeholders like business analysts or finance reviewers get reader on the workspace. They can see jobs, metrics, model versions, and endpoint status, but cannot submit jobs or modify anything. One explicit exam trap. Do not use owner at the workspace scope. Owner includes the ability to assign roles, which means an owner can escalate their own privileges. Always use contributor or a custom role for operational access and reserve owner assignment for the service accounts that do role management, and only via Azure PIM, Privileged Identity Management, with approval workflows in production.